Okay, so we're here with Shelby Friedman to talk about Facebook ads. What's up, Shelby?
Hey, nice to talk to you guys. Growth Galaxy is super awesome. Silver
Wow,
Swan is very happy to be here.
wow, thank you. So, um, yeah, let's just jump straight into it. So, what are your thoughts on Facebook and Instagram shops? Because I hear people talk about it, but I really want to know what you think about it.
Facebook and Instagram shops. There's a couple different components that are going into the way that the Facebook algorithm is treating Facebook and Instagram shops. So, in on the objective level, if you choose conversions, on the ad set level, it'll give you an option to choose just website conversions or website and shop. And when you split test these two campaigns, what ends up happening a lot of times is that the website and shop campaigns end up outperforming just the website campaigns. So for e-commerce, it's a really good idea. Now, the reason that the shop campaigns are outperforming normal campaigns is because Facebook and Instagram, they get a charge, they get a fee for being able to produce the checkout through there. So depending on what options you have on the back end of Shopify, Facebook and Instagram shops make more sense. When they first implemented it, they had like a 0% processing fee for a couple of years just to kind of get people on board with it. But it may make more sense for an e-com brand to go through the shops if their conversions are going to be so much lower that it's worth the processing fee. That's how to look at it from a technical side. Um, from a consumer side, all it does is reduce friction. You don't have to leave the app to have the checkout process. And of course, there's like a one-click checkout if you have your card attached to your Facebook and Instagram. So it reduces a lot of friction. It makes it easier to generate conversions just because no one has to leave the app to make the purchase. So they can be more impulsive with their decision making. For people who are less for people who are in a customer avatar that's a little bit older, less tech savvy, it's going to be a little bit harder to generate conversions. One of my clients is a jewelry brand that is more for like the 45 and up customer avatar, and they message all the time saying like, I don't know how to do the shop checkout because they're
Hmm.
not tech savvy. So for them, it made more sense to just do website. But most of the time, since Facebook and Instagram are pushing Facebook shops,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to generate better conversions. And if you upload your catalog in there and it gets approved, Facebook will buy your merch and then sell it at a 20% off discount. So it's kind of like Amazon in that way, where
Oh, I
like if
didn't
you
know
have
that.
that Amazon, yeah. So a lot of times you'll see things on sale and like the consumer, the shop itself, the shop itself, the business gets the full price for that object, and then the 20% off comes out of Facebook's pocket. So they'll actually reimburse the discounts that they build on the shops.
So it seems like if you zoom out, like shops is part of a bigger trend that's happening with Meta, which is that they are having all these issues with like privacy tracking, so they need to like own the platform where everything happens. But because of their business model, that's like not super easy. So it seems like shops is like one way where like they can control everything that's happening. I think I don't know if this is true, but I think I heard they're trying to make a phone or something. So if that's true, I don't know, I could be wrong, but if that is true, that would make sense. It's the same thing. And then the whole metaverse, like the entire reason they're doing all of that is so they can own it, and then they can like not have to worry about like these privacy laws and like technology and stuff. So do you have any thoughts on like that aspect of the metaverse, or just advertising, like advertising in the future of the metaverse in general?
Well, I do want to touch on something you said earlier about a lack of attribution. Facebook Shops also helps with attribution problems, right, for retargeting, because when you have Facebook native data, so like clicks on the ad, comments on the ad, views or visits to the Instagram profile, or instant experience opens, which is the old Facebook shops. Like before Facebook shops existed, you could create an instant experience that would pop up with a fake shop that would deep link to your website on checkout. That's kind of like unnecessary now because of Facebook shops. But the point is, all that data you can retarget on with clarity on Facebook. It's usually the actual conversions that are having tracking and attribution issues. So totally agree that Facebook wants to own the shop and checkout process. That's why they're really taking an L on their products right now, like offering their shit 20% off that they have to pay full value for. But on the metaverse, on my opinions on the metaverse are pretty interesting. You know that they lost like $200 billion doing it just to make back like 11 billion on the metaverse last year.
That's what I've heard, but it's all about the long play. But the question is like,
Is
is
it?
it even gonna like work out in the long run? Because
I don't think.
here's actually
No.
something that I don't think a lot of people know. So in what book is it? So there's a book called Sapiens that like everybody's reading, like everyone likes it. The author is his name is Yuval Noah Harari. He's written some other books that I've read. One of them, it talks about the future, and here's why it's important. So in that book, he talks about how Google basically what's the word, like Google like essentially like organized like information like on the internet, and like that's why they're a big thing. And then Facebook did the second part, which is like they did the same thing with human relationships and communication. And then that's like maybe that's why like Facebook owns WhatsApp, and they have Facebook Messenger, and they have some, I'm thinking there's some other one that they own as like messaging, communication, like human relationship apps. But then what Harari said is that there's going to be a third level, which will be digitizing the entire world. And so why is that important? Because Mark Zuckerberg loves this guy, and I've seen them do interviews before. So he talks to him, and he's read like all of his books. So what I think is happening is that Mark Zuckerberg is trying to do that third part in terms of like digitizing the entire world, because he loves this guy. He's like super smart and everything. So I think that like that's what's happening, and that he has a longer like time horizon that he's looking at. And if they lose money on it in the near term, it's okay, because if you can essentially like own like the new internet in the future, then it'll be worth it. So that's how I think that he's looking at it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of um, there's a lot of like lore that exists around us just kind of moving to a completely digital realm. Of anime in that realm too. But it seems like he's really taking a gamble, similar to like The Big Short back when the housing market crashed. So I think that he's just going to continue to lose money on this, in the hopes that it's going to work out tenfold. I just don't think that the physical tech is there yet. Like, if you ever worn an Oculus, like they're so not comfortable. Yeah, they're not comfortable, and it's not fully immersive. As much as it's trying to be fully immersive, I think he's kind of just jumping the gun on the tech. I don't think that the tech exists. I think it would make more sense for Facebook to partner with someone like Boston Dynamics and work towards like an augmented reality like hardware that will work with the metaverse. Because not only is the metaverse not necessarily existing like beyond like the graphics, beyond the GPU of like you. Not only is it not developed on the software end, nor do they have like the servers to support if the whole world decided to like jump online all of a sudden. But it's the hardware just isn't that comfortable to be used long term. Anyone I know who's played with an Oculus Rift has done so for like maybe 2 hours, and the transition to a fully immersive world, like yes, all of the big players, like Amazon, Facebook, TikTok, all these places where people are starting to make money online, even where we make money online, right? We can generate millions of dollars on a platform that generates millions of dollars a day, because they are the road that we do business on. So he's looking to invest on the new platform that's going to host a brand new economy, and I totally respect him for that. I just think he's a little too soon. And I think, like, kind of like The Big Short too. Like who's that guy's name?
Michael Berry. Whoops.
Yeah, Michael Berry. Michael Berry, right? Yeah. He was in on those shorts for like a year before he needed to be. I think he's losing money in the short term just because he's jumping the gun a little bit, but ultimately I'm sure he's right in the long term with the way that like society is going. But he probably should have partnered with like some chip device some chip device, like a Microsoft, a Bill Gates kind of thing, or like an Elon Musk
So
Neuralink.
so no, so I agree, and yeah, I think Michael Burry he's super smart, and like he called the whole inflation thing, and I think the same thing happened where he had like something like shorting some like inflation like index or something, and it was like too early. But anyway, I want to bring it back to like Facebook ads because we're kind of like going a little bit far away from it, which is fine, and that's a discussion for a later time. So one thing that you said that I've been thinking about is that deep like the relationship between DPAs and shops. So since like Facebook, Instagram shops are a thing, are DPAs obsolete, or do they still have use cases even for businesses that have shops?
GPAs are better now because shops exist.
So, but like if a DPA, I mean like a
Like
DPA like sending people to a website versus a shop.
the DPA is a deep link, so they're able to track if you've been on the shop or the website. Like all of my DPAs post iOS 14 started absolutely flunking. Like there was a point where I cut DPAs completely from my funnel just because we couldn't track who was actually watching what. So the carousel stopped working because they stopped deep linking. And then when Facebook shops and Instagram shops came back into the picture, DPAs started to work again. But there was like a very specific like black hole for dynamic product ads where they just would completely stop working. Like they were just cut from the funnel completely because you couldn't track someone up until the point where they reached checkout to know what that item was to deep link to the catalog. So the DPAs, like their entire purpose, stopped working. But now that shops kind of takes the tracking away from like those instant experiences, shops replaces those. You can like my DPA started working again 8 months after iOS.
So speaking of things that aren't working, because Facebook is like it's always like in flux, and like it's something like you said, like there's like a DPA black hole, or like something's working and then it doesn't, and then it does again and then it doesn't. Speaking of audiences, what's your take on like what audiences are working now in terms of like broad versus lookalike versus interest?
I do a mix of all three. I just keep them all separate. I mean, um, lookalikes are great because you are inputting like a data feed directly into Facebook. Facebook, it takes a lot of the guesswork out of the algorithm, as long as it's a high quality list that you can match. The biggest problem with lists are that sometimes you'll have a list full of business professional emails, but someone's Facebook is like
Mm-hmm.
10, 15 years old, which means that it's attached to some obscure email they don't use anymore. So the um, customer match isn't perfect. But then the problem with interest-based targeting options is that they are such a wide pool, they're so broad that you can duplicate it 10 times and every single ad set would have a different result just based on where inside that giant pool your ad spend is being pushed,
So
what market they're in.
So what's interesting is that with lookalikes, you mentioned list upload lookalikes, but not like web event lookalikes. Do you find those to be significantly weaker now in the post iOS 14, 14.5 environment?
Um, I would only use a web event lookalike if it was for on Facebook data, native on Facebook data. So all of the pixel event like purchase conversion lookalikes, those started flopping. But if you're doing like a video views lookalike, because you're running a video views layer top of funnel, and then you're retargeting people who actually watched 15 seconds of that video, those all work really well. But for the pixel-based purchase lookalikes, those aren't going to be as reliable nowadays. You might as well just snag the purchase data from your Shopify, upload it onto Facebook directly.
And what about broad? Because I remember a long time ago, no one would ever like think of running a broad, and then like some people tried it, and it started doing pretty well. And now it seems like it's to the point where like you want to always have a broad in a campaign that's running if you have multiple ad sets in there. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, broad audiences are pretty much saying like Facebook, if I give you the whole world and you can try a bunch of different samples, if you find one avatar that works, find people that are like that. And broads have always worked. It was kind of like a secret pre iOS, but now since targeting is not as great, now that the interest based targeting features have been cut down a lot, Yeah, you should always test a broad audience. And even if a broad is starting to fail, but it used to be your top performer, just dupe it and push it back out into the ether. I always have a broad running.
That makes sense. Let's talk about attribution also, because it's just like there's just so much more to talk about compared to back in the day. So with attribution, conversions API, is that something that everybody should be running all the time, no matter what, or are there like what are your thoughts on it?
You should have a pixel setup, you should aggregate your events, and you should have the conversions API. And then there's a lot of different softwares that exist for reporting if you're using a cross-platform approach, and those usually will have a native API as well. So with my B2B client, our tracking is perfect. My native data on Facebook is it lines up perfectly with our backend numbers, and that's for lead generation, which is usually a lot more obscure because of tracking issues. Just even before iOS, lead generation, following them through the LP, maybe they're disqualified, maybe they're not, and like the incorrect numbers would come back to Facebook. We switched to the API, and there's a native integration for the API in Go High Level, our CRM, and since then the ads have just been perfect. Like the API is going to is pretty much completely replacing the Pixel, and the Pixel is being sunsetted completely. What year is it? 2023. This year, June.
Really?
Maybe it's 2025.
Oh, I didn't know
I'll
that.
have to double. Yeah, the Pixels are being sunsetted. Google pushed back their sunsetting of the Pixel though, so it's really just Facebook is the first one to do it. But they're focusing on the API completely, and then Google's going to launch an API, or I think they might already have an API launched to supplement Pixel data.
What about so it seems like back in the day, a lot of people they would just drive leads, and it's like okay, like here's your cost per lead, whatever. And Facebook's so cheap, it's like it's fine. Now because things are getting a lot more expensive, I think people are looking for opportunities to optimize in ways that they didn't as much before. And so it seems like people are doing a lot more with CRMs now and looking at the quality of leads as they go through CRMs into like different stages in dashboards, and then ideally taking that data and then pushing that back into Facebook, Google, whatever. Do you have any thoughts on that?
On the use of CRMs?
Yeah, like specifically for lead gen. So like not looking at just the leads, but looking at revenue driven like opportunities, MQL, SQL, whatever you want to call it. I've seen a lot more people doing that now proportionally compared to before. Is that something that you're seeing as well?
I think any business doing more than 20K a month is going to be having a CRM under their belt. I think they've always had some sort of CRM software. I mean, like Salesforce being the most common, so the largest that exists, although it's also the more expensive. Like, I've never worked for an agency that didn't have a CRM that's doing lead generation, unless they were super super small. I don't think that's something where it's like,
Or
people have to lean on it more. I'm pretty sure they've like always used some sort of customer relationship tool.
or I think maybe my question's more like not like whether or not they have it, but it seems like the Facebook professional's role, like doing things like in the CRM, is becoming more and more part of the role. Whereas before, like they would just be like in Facebook all the time. Like maybe someone else would do that or something. So I mean, I'm saying that because like my perspective is that people who like media buyers are becoming more like strategic, like high level, like fractional CMO, but like more strategic in their role. So they kind of like are doing things with the CRM. They're doing things like with this, with that. Is that trend of media buying becoming less of just like tinkering in the ad platform and more of like a higher level strategic view like within the business? Is that something that you're seeing? Because that's definitely something that I'm seeing.
So I'm how do I answer this question? So yes, media buyers need to have, if they want to adapt, they're going to need to have a more holistic approach, especially post iOS. But the industry has also corrected itself. Like what happened post iOS is like everything burned to the ground as far as attribution is concerned. A bunch of accounts tanked, a bunch of small businesses went under, and a bunch of shitty media buyers had to switch careers. They just thought like the end was near. But then there's people like you and me and the people who started agencies during COVID who realized that like you don't need to quit being a media buyer, you just need to get better. I will say that I've always spent a lot of time in like I've always spent time, if it's B2C, right? I've spent time in my client's Shopify and on Facebook. That's always been a case even pre-iOS. That's just to pull numbers for reporting and cross-check what people are, like what the report in Facebook is saying versus the actual numbers. That I've always done. Pre-iOS, post-iOS, it's always going to be a thing to be on more than one platform. I don't think any good media buyer has ever just lived on Facebook unless the client has preferred the media buyer to live in a silo. You know what I'm saying? Like unless they refuse to give access to Shopify, unless they refuse to give access to Google Analytics, there's always been some sort of like tinkering and progress reports to give. As far as like being the best and being able to charge more, yeah, you're going to want to be more holistic. Like you guys do CRO. Me for CMO, I do like I'll build out funnels, I'll fix websites, I'll like launch ads, hire people for creative, whatever needs to be done for the best result. But I think that like the truth about any good marketer is that they're going to have to know how the pieces connect. And if you're a shit marketer, you're going to know just how your one piece connects.
Yeah.
Like even when I spent most of my time on Facebook, I understood every point of the customer journey, and I understood like where the quality of the user experience was taking place.
That makes sense. And the keyword that you mentioned was the good ones. So I think like the better like a media buyer is, the more they get involved in that kind of stuff. So like the lowest level is like, okay, like I like turn on an ad, like whatever, okay, and then past that is like running different creatives, things like that. And then past that, there's definitely opportunities for media buyers who are confident, and then in companies, where they maybe don't have like all the direction to, go into like the actual like brand messaging, positioning, or even like branding of the company. And it's cool being a media buyer because you can test hypotheses like that in terms of like, hey, let's test this kind of messaging versus like what was being tried before, and then with that information you can feed that back to the business, and then that could give them direction on like branding and stuff. And then also like in Shopify you can do things also like transactional data analyses. So like what's the repurchase rate. You can also see like breakdowns of how many people buy different products. So like we have a client who has products in a bunch of different colors, and we ran one of those, and the results were not at all what we were expecting in terms of like the different colors being sold. And so that kind of impacts like the like the products being sold, because now we can run a different product set with the colors that we know that people actually want, but like the combo pack like doesn't have those. That's like a simple example. So anyway, I think there's a lot of opportunities for that kind of stuff, and I think that as media buying gets harder, people will have to do more and more of that kind of stuff, and that it kind of is like CMO level stuff to like help people with their branding, messaging, positioning, and then actual like product stuff. And then past that, I think the thing that's going to be past that is to be like, hey, your product is $14.99, and then we get 1,000 purchases, and then here's your like the profit on each of those. So if we, why isn't it, $17.99, or why isn't it $13.99? What would the volume of purchases be? What would the overall profit be if we do that? We can create hypotheses and like test that. I think that kind of thing is going to be the next thing that happens in terms of making a big impact, because that can make a huge impact, but that's obviously going to be super hard to do.
Well, so outside of my CMO contracts where like I'm obligated to do whatever is needed, even when it comes to just my media buying clients, even just my like simple contracts that I have, if like you should know as a marketer, right? Like if your results are down, and your client is looking, your KPI is return on investment, ROAS. An easy way to like to increase your ROAS is to increase average order value. How do you increase average order value? You create a bundle. So you can go and you can go to your client and you can be like, hey, right now our average order value is 90. If we bundle these two items together for a 20% off discount, I can run an ad to them. And then all of a sudden the average order value is 150. And then I'll bring ROAS up from, a 2x to a 4x. And that's something, and like, once again, that just comes down to how good of a marketer you are, because it ends up being that bad marketers are always going to blame the algorithm when their shit doesn't work, and they're always going to take credit when all of a sudden it does work. I remember I had a client who was like, oh my God, like, why are orders so crazy today? And I was like, oh yeah, it was my optimizations. This was years ago. I would never do this. I was like, yeah, it was my optimizations. And then like 2 hours later, they were like, oh, like, this Twitch streamer, like called us out on this thing. And then you just sit there and you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense because I didn't do anything out of the ordinary. Like if you're going to be a good marketer, you're going to want to like understand how all these pieces connect. And I had a client just the other day being like, hey, should we increase our prices? That would increase our profit margin. And I was like, yes, but let's hit our quarterly goal first of reaching 2,000 orders a month. If we can reach 2,000 orders a month, that's 66 orders a day, comfortably at the KPI that we're looking to spend, at the ROAS that we're looking to generate, then we can increase prices and know that it will affect ROAS positively as far as your average order value is concerned, but it's also going to even out because the cost per result is probably going to be a little more expensive, seeing as how some people will be priced out of the product. So like, it's just working with the client to know like what their numbers are, what deep inventory they have. Like I've had clients that are just like, hey, I have a lot of this, can we run ads for this to get rid of it in the back end? And that's just having a good relationship with your client. It's not always going to be a price increase or a bundle. It's just going to be like understanding business holistically as opposed to just running the ads.
Yeah.
But that's, like I said, that's something that you should always have done. That's something you always should have done. Like pre-iOS, when you could just print money for people, sure, like you could take the shortcut. Like you can just print money. But like if you want to be a good marketer, you're gonna want to understand business. You want to understand business.
Well,
that's how it works.
What's gonna happen is that the people who don't know much or that are entry level will have a really hard time because it is becoming because those things become more and more necessary. So people who know those things are gonna have an easier time because there's more demand for that kind of thing, and then you get more practice with that kind of stuff, and then it gets easier. But two things I wanted to mention is that with like price like increases, decreases, like bundle those, like adding, removing new products, you can split test that stuff too. It's just like kind of complicated, and it's important to be objective, like you said, when people are like the algorithm's not doing well. That's why. Those are the same people who like when their team lost the election and then. No, when their team won the election and then gas prices, go down, they take all the credit. And then when they go up, now they're suddenly like super interested in like the oil industry and like all the intricacies and like how like complicated and nuanced it is because they like are not objective. But I want to talk about something else that's pretty big on Facebook. That's like super big, which is creatives. So this is a super broad question, but just in terms of like creative strategy on Facebook 2023, do you have any broad or specific thoughts on like what you're seeing?
So when it comes to existing posts, which obviously come with built-in social proof and they're easier to convert, you should not change the aspect ratio on any of the placements, or you cannot duplicate it into other funnels because you can't. Like if you change the aspect ratio, then it's considered a custom creative, which means that you'll have to recreate the EP existing post on every single ad set that you have, as opposed to just duping and dropping the ad ID. Super, super frustrating. And for a media buyer who has like a full load of clients, you're just not going to want to do it. The workaround for that, instead of editing every single placement, is to have an EP layer, an EP campaign that opts out of the placements that look terrible with existing posts, with things that already exist on people's feeds. So if it's a feed post, obviously it's going to be great on the story, it's going to be great in the feed, it's going to be great in the marketplace and the search. It's going to do terrible on the tiny display placements. And depending on the ratio, it might actually get cut off on stories, and you might want to cut stories as well. So I would just, for creative, to be the most dynamic and to not have anything cut off, you're going to want to split existing posts into its own ad category or ad set category so that you can manually control the placements. With ads that you're creating natively, you're going to want to just edit every placement so that it looks good on every feed, and then you're going to want to keep automatic placements for the form for like an ABO layer that's specifically testing. And then the creatives that I see working the best are obviously going to be video. Make sure you add the subtitles to your videos. That's like 85% of viewers. Actually, it's shrunk down to, I think, like 70 or 65 now, just because people are watching more reels. They're doing more like audio-based, but make sure that you have your captions on your creative for, you know, the over 50% of people who watch videos without the audio on. So videos are going to be number one. Make sure you have captions for it. Make sure that the thumbnail is enticing, and then split out existing posts and like back-end made ads in just two separate layers. Other than that, and I know this isn't directly related, but I'd also split out my lookalikes versus my interest-based targeting into two separate campaigns.
Oh, two separate campaigns.
Yeah, no, not two separate ad sets. I mean, you shouldn't stack anything anymore. Everything should be a single interest on its own, tested against other things, or a single lookalike on its own, tested. Like stacked audiences, maybe middle of funnel, bottom of funnel, because it's such a small audience, but broad, no. Keep it all separate. But you're going to want to separate lookalikes and interest-based targeting. I don't have a 100% reason on this, other than the algorithm kind of pools together like similar audience overlaps there. So you're not going to want like a broad audience overlap with a lookalike overlap, because then the algorithm is just going to kind of be confused on what to attribute it to. So you're just going to want to keep them in separate campaigns.
What about the, and I was trying to remember what it's like, the Advantage Plus thing? You know what I'm talking about?
That's a PMax campaign.
You mean on Facebook? It's the
on Facebook. It is the Facebook equivalent to a PMax campaign.
So in that case, I'm not sure where you stand on PMaxes. By the time this comes out, it'll be abundantly clear where I stand on Google's performance maxes, so I won't have to say anything in the future. But in terms of your thoughts on on this feature in Facebook, what do you think?
I like it. It's a catch-all campaign. It's trying to eliminate media buyers, so I did a test. I recently took over a client that I got from an old coworker at an old job, you know, like he dropped him, fired this guy, and handed him off to me. And when I took a look at the accounts, 90% of the budget was going towards this Advantage Plus campaign, which I usually stay away from, because the point of having a media buyer is for them to manually do the campaigns to get better results than anything automatic, right? So I've never really touched automatic Advantage Plus campaigns. This guy had 90% of his budget on an Advantage Plus campaign and then a random top of funnel campaign. That was the first I'd ever actually used the Advantage Plus, and so I did a bunch of split tests. Advantage Plus is going to be a catch-all safety net campaign. It's going to have MOFU, BOFU, and TOFU all mixed together, and it's going to move off of a data source of past purchasers specifically to populate the audience. So there's no audience you can choose. It's very, very limited in its features. That's why I'm saying it's very like a PMax campaign. Like you can't, it's automatic. It's automatic all the way through. And a lot of people who can't afford media buyers, this is how Facebook is trying to get them back on the platform. So, hey, I know you had to fire your media buyer. I know that your marketing budget is non-existent anymore. Throw everything into one Advantage Plus campaign and we'll generate purchases for you. And for the most part, they do. They generate purchases at for context, I have a jewelry client, their average order value is 120, right? So it's really easy to talk case studies with them, because AOV 120, their PMax Advantage Plus campaign on Facebook, generating purchases for $40. So that is a 3x return on the Advantage Plus. Just not touching it at all. Spending thousands of dollars a day, generating 20, 30 purchases a day at $40 a piece. Problem is, when we looked into attribution, we realized that the Advantage Plus campaign spent more than 80% of the budget on a warm audience. So we were quickly depreciating our warm audience because it's a catch-all campaign, and that's how the PMax is going to drive the cheapest conversions, is pretty much by like pretending the funnel is squished and really spending most of the budget on the bottom of funnel. Cheapest campaign, cheapest conversion. So once I realized that 90% of the budget was bottom of funnel, I started working to manually create my funnel to outperform the Advantage Plus campaign, and that was done very quickly. I mean, within 3 days, I was generating better results. So I keep it on, and I keep it running at $1,000 a day as the catch-all. But I very quickly wanted to readjust the funnel daily budgets. So now I'm spending, $3,000 top of funnel outside of the Advantage Plus campaign, $1,000 on the Advantage Plus, so that it just has that funnel structure that's going to keep a healthy campaign, keep new purchasers coming through the pipeline, so that we're saturating a new audience. Because the Advantage Plus is not going to do that. It's going to claim to be top of funnel. It's going to be mostly bottom of funnel.
So that's interesting because Performance Max on Google does something similar where it'll like cannibalize the other campaigns, and then all the conversions actually come from branded, and then you're spending like so much money on display and like video that and anyway, we'll have a whole blog article on that already made by now. So we are getting close to time. So do you have any final parting wisdom for us, Shelby?
I think the most important thing that media buyers like to section themselves away from is organic social. So media buyers hate social media management for good reason. I hate it too. But as we're moving more into this like holistic marketing, a lot of people they're looking at website and they're looking at funnels, but they're not taking a look at the organic social and the organic efforts that the brand is doing already. That's where you're going to get your best social proof. That's where you're going to get your best ads. And yeah, like if the website is absolute trash, it's going to be really hard to convert, but you can always build out a quick sales funnel same day. I vet clients before I take them on based on whether or not they're trying on their end too. Because if not, you're just going to be rolling the boulder up the mountain every single day because they're not trying. They're not doing anything to promote their brand organically, which means that they're depending too deeply on ad spend, and they're going to be like pretty much over my shoulder looking at every little thing I do because I'm their whole marketing strategy. So if you're going towards a holistic approach, you're going to want to check out your clients' socials before you sign them on. Just make sure they're trying.
Okay, I like that. Okay, well, thank you, Shelby. It was a great interview.
Thank you. I love being on.
Okay, yeah, and I'm sure you'll be back sometime. So, uh, yeah, so this was great. Thank you, and yeah, and then I'll see you somewhere in the world.